Hi guys, this is Anya Kay, bringing you part 20 of the Irrational series. Full playlist linked below in the description. The 2 days and nights you spent in jail felt like eternity. The deputy finally unlocked your cell door and led you out to the main office, into the crushing hug of Mike. Aizawa stood by, waiting. You walked with them, blinking in the sunlight, and got into the back seat of Mike's car. "How much did you have to pay to bail me out?" you asked suspiciously. Mike was driving. An unusual sight, but better than Aizawa driving without arms. "The amount is irrelevant." You grimaced. "It must be a lot." "He wouldn't let me help pay," Mike complained. "Uncool." "Thanks for driving, Mike," you said in a weak attempt to make him feel better. "Eiko," Aizawa spoke up. "You're 2 days behind on classes. Listen closely." He gave you a concise summary of what you had missed, along with several assignments of topics you needed to read up on. You hid a smile. There was something reassuring about Aizawa only being concerned over missed classes. Something he said sparked your interest. "Sports festival? Oh right, it's that time of year." You gazed out the window thoughtfully. "Will I be able to participate?" "Yes," Aizawa said testily. "Nezu knows you're innocent. With him backing you, no one can have doubts about your eligibility." "No one except the odd idiot on staff anyways," Mike muttered. Aizawa glared at him. "Who?" you demanded. "Oh," Mike laughed uneasily. "No one. Never mind." You wouldn't get anything else out of him. Not with Aizawa around. You settled back into your seat, discomfited. Midnight would have your back for sure. Mike and Aizawa, obviously. And Nezu, it seemed. How many of the other teachers believed you were innocent? You thought through them quickly. Vlad King, Ectoplasm, Snipe, All Might, Cementos. Honestly, you could see them reacting either way. Most of them only knew you through Dad. And Dad wasn't exactly the most popular teacher at UA. Mike dropped you and Aizawa off at your house. 20 minutes later, the doorbell rang, and you opened it to see Shinso looking down at you with untidy hair and dark smudges under his eyes. "Eiko," he breathed, relieved. He stood, staring down at you haggardly, until you punched him in the shoulder. He put a hand over the spot, wincing. "Don't ever break the law for me again." He grimaced, knowing what you were referring to, and then smiled his usual slight, wry smile. And just like that, everything was back to normal. The 2 days in jail had seemed like an eternity, but the 2 weeks after getting home blew by in a blur. Everyone in Class 1A was super excited to see you walking into the classroom the next day. Mina tackle-hugged you. Sue said, "We missed you, Eiko, Ribbit." Fenki stared in starry-eyed happiness. Deku dissolved into rapid rambling, and Kirishima patted you on the back enthusiastically. All their chatter blended into a happy hubbub, and you smiled, feeling a heart pang. It seemed that the entire class had unanimously decided to back you up. Even Bakugo gave you a slight nod. As the day of the sports festival approached, you noticed more and more people from the other courses eyeing your classmates as they walked through the halls. And, unless you were imagining it, they were especially looking at you. Your sensitive ears picked up whispers of "scary" and "girl on the news." You grimaced, doing your best to ignore it. Hearing stuff like that was a downside of your superhuman hearing. You'd always heard people whisper about Shinso. Hearing whispers about Shinso always made you angry, but hearing whispers about you just made you feel unsettled. The day before the sports festival, you came down the hallway to find a swarm of students outside the door of your classroom. You slowed, confused. "Out of my way, extras!" You heard the unmistakable snarl of Bakugo from within the classroom. "Stop calling people extras just because you don't know them," Ida protested helplessly. You slowed as you neared the edge of the dense crowd. But someone caught your elbow, smoothly leading you forward and shoving a path through. It was Shinso, flashing a sly grin as students made slight noises of protest at the way he elbowed through with you. "I came to see what the famous Class 1A was like. Shinso declared mockingly. People hastily stepped out of his way to avoid getting involved in the scene he was starting. But, Shinso continued loudly in a bored tone, all I see are a bunch of egomaniacs. You and Shinso stopped, finally at the front, face to face with your classmates. Bakugo stood in front of the other members of Class 1A, meeting Shinso's gaze with level dislike. The ash-blonde's eyes flicked briefly to Shinso's hand on your arm, and his glower darkened. Are all the students in the hero course like this? Shinso asked, looking down his nose at them. You glanced up at Shinso. You'd known he was tall, but you hadn't realized until now that he was taller than Bakugo. He played the role of mocking superiority almost too well. Shinso rubbed the back of his neck with a disappointed sigh. Seeing this makes me disillusioned. He fixed Bakugo with a bored stare. There are quite a few people enrolled in the general studies track because they didn't make it into the hero course. Did you know that? Bakugo glared. Depending on the results of the sports festival, UA will consider our transfer into the hero course, and they may transfer hero course students out. Class 1A flinched at the information, eyes wide. The rest of these people may be here to scout out the enemy. He stared into Bakugo's eyes, but I just came to say that I plan to sweep your feet out from under you. He turned and left, leaving a flustered Class 1A behind him. Your classmates tried to get Bakugo to take back what he'd said to the general students, but Bakugo didn't care about anything except winning. You gazed thoughtfully at the place Shinso had vanished. How much of that had been an act? How much of it had been just to get you through the crowd? The gawking students dispersed immediately as Aizawa approached. He started his lesson right on time. And then, the day finally came. You waited alongside your nervous classmates in the enormous stadium of the sports festival. Bakugo stepped up to the microphone to make a speech. All I have to say, his voice echoed in the vast space and waiting crowds up in the stands, is that I'm gonna win. He stepped down, ignoring the collective gasp of spectators and students. You snickered to Mina. That's exactly what I expected. People are gonna hate our class, Mina groaned. You got behind the starting line, jostling for a good position. Start! Midnight yelled. Everyone pounded forward, jostling and shoving.
Okay, here's the play-by-play.
Mike's voice blared happily over the jumbo speakers.
Are you ready to do the commentary, Mummy Man?
How did you talk me into this?
Aizawa's voice sighed. Todoroki tried to freeze everyone to the ground, but you jumped up as the ice sheet spread under and past you, landing on top of the ice fluidly. Mina hadn't been so lucky. Her legs were encased, and she gasped from the cold as she sprayed acid from her hands to break free. See ya! You saluted cheekily and left her in the dust. Holding back would be an insult to your opponents. You caught sight of a familiar floof of purple hair and grinned. You knew he'd been planning to participate in the festival. So far, he was doing well. You jogged up. You found an army of minions to carry you over the ice? Shinso looked down at you, eyebrow raised. Jealous? You shook your head, miming zipping your lips. You saw an appreciative glint in his eye. He definitely would have brainwashed you. You sprinted past him, able to move faster than his zombie horde. Giant robots loomed ahead. Todoroki used his ice to freeze through. Bakugo blasted over the top, with Sero and Tokoyami close behind. Dodging a robotic arm, you sprinted through a gap in their lines to follow. Most of your classmates were doing really well so far, and the crowd followed their lead, charging past fallen robots. The second barrier was a network of plateaus and wide chasms with no bottom in sight. It would be a long fall, and the only way across were single ropes connecting the plateaus to each other. Sue took the lead, leaping onto a rope and climbing it with frog-like speed. You decided that the ropes were taut enough for you to run and keep your balance, so you set across in a careful dash. Bakugo and Todoroki were already far ahead, using sheer power to blast across with explosions and ice. By the time you got to the third obstacle, a minefield, Bakugo and Todoroki were halfway across. Your sharp eyes could easily pick out where the mines were located. Unlike most of the others, You wouldn't have to sacrifice speed to be careful. You ran. Those who tried to follow misstepped and got thrown by the small blasts, but a few caught on and began to follow exactly in your footsteps. You grinned. Not just anyone could follow your inhumanly fast steps that precisely. Suddenly, the crowd went wild as a huge explosion came from the back of the minefield. You saw a plate of metal flying above on the edge of the blast, and you heard Mike's excited yelling about Midoriya taking the lead. Midoriya? He was riding the blast on a plate of metal from the robots. The kid really was something. "Eraserhead!" Mike yelled over the jumbo speakers. "Your students are amazing! What the heck are you teaching them?" "This has nothing to do with me. Each of them is powered by their own drive to succeed," Aizawa analyzed. "There you have it! Eraserhead is a terrible teacher!" What? Midoriya made it to the end of the course, in first place, with Todoroki and Bakugo following in second and third. You were on track to make it in fourth, sprinting the final few meters, when one of the people following in your footsteps suddenly shot a mass of green vines at you. You jumped up to dodge, but they caught you in midair and sprinted past. You were stuck in a mass of tightly binding vines. "And Aizawa is stuck, only a few meters from the finish!" Mike yelled cheery commentary at your predicament. He was having way too much fun. You caught a glimpse of the student who trapped you as they passed. A girl with vines for hair. By the time you slashed free and got to the finish, you were in 10th place, just behind a grinning Kirishima. I shouldn't have dropped my guard, you thought irritably. The first 42 to finish made it to round 2, a cavalry battle. People could steal each other's headbands to steal each other's points. Those who'd arrived sooner had more points at the start, making them a bigger target. And the first to arrive, Midoriya, was assigned a point value of 10 million points. Every eye turned to examine the green-haired kid speculatively as they thought about the victory of stealing his points. Soon, everyone began teaming up into groups of 2 to 4. You glanced around. Shinso was already carefully assembling a mind-controlled group. Todoroki's group was full. "Eiko, join us!" Mina beckoned to you, and Kirishima grinned at you invitingly. You glanced at the explosive blonde on their shoulders. "I'll pass. See you out there." Kiri gave you a thumbs up for good luck. Bakugo glowered. Everyone avoided Deku like the plague. But as you watched him talking with Ochako and Tokoyami, a plan formed in your mind. You headed towards them. In a dark room, Katsumi Shinso and Tomura Shigaraki watched the screen intently as the girl with fine hair trapped you.
"Aizawa's in fourth! Wait, and Aizawa is stuck! Only meters from the finish, she's trapped like a kitten in a ball of yarn! Aw, precious!"
"Shut up, Mike," Eraserhead growled. Mike continued.
"What a devious move after following her tracks for the entire minefield! Not knowing the other class's quirks sure puts your class at a disadvantage, eh, Eraser?"
Tomura Shigaraki froze the screen on a pixelated image of you slashing free of the vines. "It's that brat," he hissed. "The one who started Kurogiri's glitching problem." Katsumi leaned up against the wall behind him. "You're lucky that's all that happened," he informed Shigaraki icily. "If you'd actually succeeded in dealing with her, your mentor would have you thrown out to the mercy of the heroes. She's essential to his plan. You are not." Shigaraki spun around, crimson eyes glinting in rage, hands reaching to scratch his neck. "If that's true, why wasn't I told? How was I supposed to know about her?" "You haven't earned All for One's trust yet." Shigaraki rose to his feet abruptly. "You think you're so much better, just because you've been at his side for longer. I was raised by All for One. He's promised me more than you could dream of when I grow into it." Katsumi Shinso looked bored. "What are you waiting for, then? Grow up." The simple line pushed Shigaraki over the edge. He started forward, hands reaching for Katsumi's throat. Kurogiri entered the room at that moment. "Master Shigaraki," Kurogiri spoke, and then caught sight of the screen and trailed off, eyes riveted on the image of you. I... Kurogiri's eyes glitched like faulty fluorescent lights, sending shudders through his misty form. "Kurogiri!" Shigaraki ordered furiously. "Leave!" Kurogiri obediently fled the room, closing the door behind him. Shigaraki sank down into his seat, his irritation with Katsumi forgotten. "He's been doing that a lot, hasn't he?" Katsumi asked sardonically. "Almost twice a day," Shigaraki complained. "He used to be so reliable, but ever since the USJ, I don't know when he'll become a space case. He has all these triggers. Sushi, clouds, abandoned animals. The other day he was glitching out while looking at the goggles Dr. Garaki had left on his workbench. There's no pattern. Something about that cat-quirked brat really set him off." Katsumi listened to Shigaraki's ranting, yawned, and turned towards the door. "Have fun dealing with that." He ignored Shigaraki's rage. Deep in the base, Kurogiri sat in a dark room, misty arms curled around misty knees. Memories from the USJ were doing something terrible to him. He was sure of it. Every time he remembered noticing your cat-quirk at the USJ, he felt odd. And it was even worse when he remembered the two heroes that had come to help you. The loud blonde one, and the serious dark-haired one with the weaponized scarf. That hero, in particular, he needed to block from his mind. Remembering the look on his face as he'd been protecting the cat girl, Kurogiri felt himself glitching again and forced his focus back onto his surroundings. He would be of no use to Master Shigaraki if he couldn't deal with this. And so he sat, meditating and burying his memories of the Scarf Hero deep enough that it wouldn't cause this problematic glitch. In the room far above him, the broadcast of the sports festival continued. He tried not to listen whenever the name Aizawa came faintly through the ceiling, in a familiar voice.
Do you know what you want? Looking for yourself in a bottle of red.